So, are you ready for the next wave in AI? Thank you for joining me. And Steve, my name is James. I am the head of marketing for FormusPro. We are a Microsoft partner both here in the UK and the US. For those of you who know, we're based in Hereford in the UK, out far out in the countryside. In the US, we've got offices in Chicago and Florida. Been trading for about 12 years, and today I am talking about Agentic AI with my colleague Steve.
I'm Steve. I'm our business development manager. My background is not-for-profit sort of digital transformation and technology change, and a lot of the not-for-profits I talk to present challenges and successes that I then take and try and help the rest of the industry with and implant some of those learnings with the likes of yourselves as well.
So what are we talking about today, and why are we talking about it? So it's our webinar, so unfortunately you are going to get about 30 seconds on who FormusPro are. That's just the cost of admission, unfortunately. I'm going to want to give a big thank you to the Microsoft Elevate team, which what was Tech for Social Impact. They're the guys that made this all possible. We're then going to be talking about the baseline of AI. So when we talk about AI, most people these days automatically go to sort of Copilot and ChatGPT, which is generative AI. It's actually just the newest evolution of AI, or was up until 6-9 months ago, where we started all talking about agentic AI. That'll be the sort of the next topic. We then will be talking about how you can do agentic AI with Microsoft, some practical tips directly for non-profits on how to actually get started. The risks of inaction, which is where we'll try and inspire a little bit of FOMO in you to either work with ourselves or somebody else. And actually, the biggest part of this is starting small, starting easy, and making sure it's a success. But before we get started, who are FormusPro and why do we get to talk to you at all? So we were founded back in 2012 in the UK. Quite an ambitious goal. We wanted to reshape how Microsoft partners, dealt with the non-profit sector. Our founder and CEO, Glenn, founded the company and is still our CEO today, single owner operator. Really didn't like how the tier one partners were treating the non-profit space at the time. Nobody really went out looking for the non-profit sector or dedicating themselves to the non-profit sector. So what you got was a lot of tier one partners treating non-profits like other commercial organizations, albeit with some discounts, although I would argue not enough. That's not good for the partner, though, and it's not good for the non-profit. You've got a unique tribal language, you have unique needs, you have unique problems and issues that need addressing. So we were really founded to service the non-profit sector, and that's what we still do to this day. 50-60% of our clients are non-profits. In fact, our first client, Anthony Nolan, the blood cancer charity, are still with us today. Something we are incredibly proud of.
Yeah, thanks, James. So we've got just a few logos of our current customers on the screen. We've got a mix of fundraising and volunteering charities, membership associations like Chambers of Commerce, and also a mix of commercial organisations. So there's a very diverse types of companies on this list, but all experienced very similar challenges and kind of ideas and thought processes when it comes to AI. So things like making sure their data is secure and AI won't expose it. And we have so many ideas, but where do we start and what's the first use case that we explore? So everyone has the same challenges. A lot of the combination of not-for-profit, public sector, private sector. We'd like to bring some ideas from all industries really and just take what is working well with both the technology and the people and put it into these sorts of webinars for you to try and impart that knowledge onto you as well.
So moving on to Microsoft Elevate, who have recently changed their name. They are part of Microsoft Philanthropy. That's the non-profit arm of Microsoft. As it sounds, plowing all their stuff straight back into discounts for the non-profit sector. They've recently changed from TSI to Elevate. So it just used to be Tech for Social Impact, and technically it still is, to be fair. But that social impact has now widened from just non-profits to now also include what's called Sub K13. So it's education for those, we call it sixth form and under. I suppose in the States it would be education at sort of like just before you go off to college and under. And their mission is to empower every person, every organization on the planet to achieve more, which is why they're sort of including sort of like children in that and education. And I think it's really well lofty goal. Expand opportunity, earn trust, protect fundamental rights, and advance sustainability, which is why we love working with the Elevate team. And actually, a big part of what they're going to be doing is going to focus, a big part of everything Microsoft is doing is going to be focused on AI. Are we building machines to replace people or to help people thrive? Are we trying to create AI that is going to outsmart humanity or elevate it? And it's a fair point. And actually, me and Steve will touch on this a little bit with these slides as we go through. And it is something that, as nonprofit leaders, you do need to consider. And as I said, part of Elevate's mission is to bring the power of AI to social impact organizations and educational institutions around the globe. They've raised a lot of money. They have a lot of AI credentials. And they really sort of focus on the launch of their AI Economic Institute at the moment. So I'll send all these slides out because you're not here to talk about Elevate, but they do a lot of really exciting work for the sector and are well worth working through. So on to today's stuff. Before we can really talk about the next wave of AI, which, as we all hopefully know by now, because I've mentioned it a couple of times, is Agentic. First of all, quick thumbs up. Who has heard of Agentic and is currently using it, even as small trials? Hoping to not get too many thumbs up here. None. Absolutely excellent. Right, so who's heard of generative AI? Give me a thumbs up for who's heard of generative AI. Excellent. Okay, so generative AI, we hadn't really heard of that up until about November 2022 when OpenAI launched ChatGPT, and that's very much what we now understand by generative AI to be. Generative AI, it's still, for a lot of non-profits, if we're being completely blunt, it's still very shiny and new. In terms of technology, it's only sort of 3 years old, not even 3, but it's almost outdated now in terms of AI, and that's because a lot of AI technology, its growth is just exponential. And we have a slide to show that that's quite scary at the minute. Tools like Copilot or ChatGPT, they're still seen as clever assistants. They can draft for you, they can summarize, they can polish. But if you stop there, if that's all you use them for, you're really only using the surface. You use the surface, scratching the surface. The danger is that people confuse novelty, which is just using ChatGPT to maybe help draft an email, with true transformation. A good first draft is nice, but it isn't going to change your nonprofit. It's not going to change how your nonprofit changes its mission or affects the world around it. The real win is when you start to reimagine how you work, not just with the tools, sort of like as a tool, but how you embed them in your organization and how you use these tools to change the world and elevate your mission.
That's it. That's actually where we are seeing most non-profits using generative AI with their work at the moment. So for admin relief mainly, and things like drafting thank you notifications for new donors and summarizing long board reports, helping with grant applications and drafting those. And what you get back at the moment isn't perfect, but it's much better than maybe this time last year, this time a few months ago. And it certainly is a massive time saver. And while, as James is saying, these things aren't necessarily hugely transformational, the one positive that we can take from it is not-for-profits are starting to experiment with AI and just get going with it. And that's really important at the moment.
I think, to be honest, it's the key point of today's sort of webinar. This isn't about replacing strategy or leadership. Far from it. It's about creating the conditions for people to do more of the work that only people can do, the stuff that AI just can't do. So to place that in behavioral science terms, behavioral science, I'm not going to claim credit for the term. It's called friction cost, or the friction cost of everyday work. So we tend as people to underestimate just how much value gets lost in that daily grind, the endless manual, menial, small tasks that sap attention and energy and drive. Used well, AI, and I'm classing generative AI here and agentic, it takes the heavy lifting away. So your team gets to focus their creativity, their judgment, their empathy on the parts of the mission that really matter. I'm guessing the parts of your mission that really matter aren't Excel spreadsheets and sending emails. But before we move on to agentic, there is a growing gap in AI, both in generative to agentic, but both also the non-profit sector. and the corporate sector. And it's an uncomfortable truth. Most nonprofits that at least I've spoke to, I don't want to draw too many conclusions, but most of the people I've talked to are still sat around their boardroom debating what they should be doing about AI. So ChatGPT, should we be implementing this? Should we be enabling our staff to do it? Do you think we should have an AI policy? Now, most of their staff are probably happily using it and beavering away doing a lot of stuff with AI without a lot of board members even knowing. But there isn't any unified AI projects within the within sort of most non-profits. And that's a big problem because you're already out of date, unfortunately, as the slide says. The organizations that are already experimented today, they're not just learning the tools, they're building a culture of AI agility. And that's where the real advantage lies with AI. It's not in sort of using really impressive tools now. That's going to come in the next 12 months, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years. What's happening now is the forward-thinking nonprofits are building the habits, not using the tech. And it's those habits that are going to put them in a really strong position over the next few years.
That's exactly right. And the gap in both those habits and the adoption of AI is just getting wider and wider as time goes on. So we've already seen charities who are automating donor follow-ups and reports completely, and even using AI to carry out entire workflows. And the thing is, once these initial processes bed in and the staff get used to them, then the barrier to the next AI project is lower because you've got the foundations, it works. And that's
absolutely.
There are a few points here that emphasize the fact that it's more about just get started and it compounds and you snowball, whereas you will just get left further and further behind as others are exponentially snowballing with their AI adoption, where perhaps your organization's still drafting policies about whether staff can copy and paste into ChatGPT, which is some conversations
there's still a lot of people doing
recently.
it. Yeah. But you're right, it is a classic behavioral problem. And as a marketer, I tend to look in stuff in terms of psychology and behavioral problems. People tend to overestimate the risks of action of doing something, but they underestimate the risks of not doing something. So we will tie ourselves in knots worrying about what might go wrong if we do this, but we'll never actually ask ourselves the question, well, what might go wrong if we don't do this? And it's a weird psychological thing in most people's head, but it's one that nonprofits certainly need to start addressing now. That's why this gap is growing. It's not about who has the fanciest AIs or the fastest tools. It's about who's willing to build that momentum early to treat it as a learning curve rather than a tick box policy exercise.
Yeah, exactly. But I don't want to get confused with people thinking that the gap growing is all about having the best tech stack, because it's really not, and it's never been about that with just digital transformation and technology in general. You could have the absolute best technology stack possible, but if your mindset isn't right, if you don't have clearly defined outcomes, if you're not involving your people and making them feel valued, then it's worthless. This experimentation also has to evaluate how the people are affected positively and negatively, and use your findings with your staff as the foundations for subsequent successful AI projects. It's all just testing the waters, and this AI world is contains so many unknowns still that just getting started is really advantageous.
But the longer it takes you to get started, the harder it's going to be to catch up with everyone else. And as a non-profit, I'm sure you're aware how noisy the space is at the moment and how many demands there are on people for their donations. It gets noisier and noisier every day, unfortunately. So why you're all here today, what on earth is Agentic AI? Agentic AI is a huge shift. And Generative AI, the tools we've all been playing with since 2022, they're about suggestions, they're about prompting. So they might help you think faster if you're using it to brainstorm. I love using my ChatGPT and Copilot for brainstorming. They can definitely help you write faster, they will polish things up. They're accelerators, to put it in terms of sort of Microsoft tech talk. But Agentic AI is different. And it's the difference between, if you imagine a generative AI as a map, and I can look up where I want to go on a map, agentic AI would be a taxi driver who's going to take me there. It's that simple. It goes from reactive to proactive, from advising to doing.
Yeah, so instead of just suggesting, generative AI, which is what generative AI does, agentic AI actually carries out the work for you. So in the context of Microsoft technologies, if we can make it a bit more real world, that would mean it will carry out an automated process, and then it can trigger another automated process off of the back of it. Or it can take an inbound donor inquiry, look at your knowledge base, look at the donor's contact record in your donor management system or CRM, and then provide a tailored response back to the initial inquiry. And at first you would think, oh, okay, well, that's removing some of the human element of the way donors interact with us. But reframing that view to look at it as it's actually unlocking more time for our people to give supporters a phone call and spend more time on the phone with them for deeper inquiries or unresolved initial inquiries. So yeah, it's very different to generative AI in that it will save a lot of time actually across an entire business process or workflow.
Yeah, it sort of goes back to what I was just saying about behavior. So people really do underestimate how valuable it is not to get help with the job, but to just have the job itself disappear. So at the moment, those that are using AI will tend to celebrate the flashy outputs. So it's like, oh, look at how quickly this email draft was created and how great it is and how slick it is. Actually, the real magic is where you don't need to generate an email at all, because it's just handled in the back office. And I say back office, the back end processes, because that task has just evaporated from you. So an intern gives you ideas. You might still carry the burden of execution, though. A reliable team member might just handle things. That's the leap to agentic, where those tasks just disappear, and suddenly your organization, because and I'm going to ask you all for another quick thumbs up or thumbs down. Who doesn't have enough resources or cash? Who would really benefit from more? There we go, hands appearing already. Who would benefit from more people hours and volunteer time? So we had a question earlier about AI that I actually thought was really clever. And it was like, at the moment, AI is allowing us to do a lot more, but actually it just means we've got more to do. So we haven't really seen the benefit from it. It's actually made us busier. Agentic AI is the next step where actually your tasks disappear and you can then sort of start upskilling your staff and getting them to do much more impactful things.
And that is, as we've seen from all the thumbs up, massive for non-profits, because certainly one of, if not the biggest pain points I always come across in my conversations is resource, constantly stretched. And it's just that it is allowing non-profits in the minute to reclaim hours of admin every week, and even 1 hour of admin a week is huge,
especially per person times over. Yeah.
And that's what makes this wave really important, because it's not we don't really have to give these tools the level of input that we're having to give generative AI. It just quietly takes care of stuff in the background, and I think we are moving to a bit of like we've been trying to perfect admin processes and business processes for so long, and actually this is going to give us a chance to perfect our people processes and the way we actually engage people in the real world.
It's all well and good talking about it in theory, though, Steve. It's agentic AI can be quite a nebulous concept to get. So, should we talk about some practical actions? How does how does agentic AI actually show up in, say, M365? So your Excels and your Outlooks and your Words. Because these are tools people are already living in, right? Let's not sort of make any big grandiose promises. Should we give a couple of examples of how they could go away today and start implementing stuff?
Yeah, and Microsoft 365 or Office 365 as it was is a really good place to start, because there are a lot of Copilot features in there already, and with different types of Microsoft licenses you get access to some really cool features. So things like connecting Copilot to Outlook to automatically set up Teams follow-ups and calendar invites, and identify the top 3 points from your last 50 emails that have gone unread because you've been in a meeting for the first 4 hours of the day. Or, stuff like tidying up a Word document, having a list of previously successful grant applications in a SharePoint library and using Copilot to ask it to draft you a new grant proposal using all of the best bits of all of those successful grant applications that you've got in your SharePoint library. A lot of it is about knowing the use cases and having the ideas, and you can start doing a lot of this yourself, because most charities that we speak to have something like Outlook, Teams, most have all, some have some of it, and there will be some stuff that you can do, no doubt, straight away, even without having to buy any other license than what you have already.
And actually, a lot of those examples still are just edging on the edge of generative AI. For instance, talking about grant proposals, you could absolutely have several grant proposals, sitting in your SharePoint. You could take it to the next step with Agentic AI, though, and have it constantly searching for proposals or just waiting for proposals to come in. When one lands, nobody needs to do anything. Your Agentic AI will just go and search for previous proposals, write one up, and then ping somebody for authorization and say, this just came in, I've written this, do you want to approve it? That's where generative AI, it's instantaneous and it's proactive. It's not reactive. It's not you asking to do something. It's proactive. And that's just M365. We can also move on to the Power Platform. And for me, at least, this is where Agentic AI starts to feel really sort of transformative. If you think about the flows that, I don't know, approve expenses, schedule your volunteers, move data between your systems. The clever bit is when AI doesn't just recommend those flows or help you build some of the content that goes into those flows, but it actually triggers them. It's a behavioral shift. So the system becomes a doer, not just an advisor.
And then talking about Dynamics 365 or
Yep.
other kind of donor relationship management and CRM platforms that other non-profit organizations use. If you're tracking your donors or members somewhere, then you can do some really clever stuff with AI around generating reports and stuff like that. So I know a few charities who have an AI agent that its job is just to constantly look at their donor and member data and automatically update their Power BI management reports with adding its own commentary based on its analysis of your system, and when it's looked a bit deeper into all these records and any other commentary in those records, and just collating everything. And so that's like a day's job, creating that report and adding your commentary that is instantaneous. You can automate the entire donor thank you process. So as soon as that donation comes in and that donor's registered, you could send a thank you notification out. But with Agentic AI, it can go into that donor's record. It can look at any previous interactions you may have had, or if they're a new donor, it can access any of the information that they've submitted already without having spoken to you. And then it's analyze that information and it will present it back to the donor, and it will tailor the thank you, and it will personalize the initial contact. And that, I think, starts to remove some of the negatives around, oh, well, you've just got a bot replying to us. And actually, no, it is an intelligent bot that knows me. And actually, that we can start to realize that the nonprofit is doing this for efficiency. And so they can free up the humans to do human work rather than, oh, they've just installed a bot because they want to start with AI, but it's getting everything wrong. So Agentic AI is really going to, I think, help with those negative perceptions of AI in that customer service and donor relations and supporter relations space.
And we keep talking in a future tense as though Agentic AI will do this, Agentic AI is going to do that. And the reason that's happening is just because so many people haven't adopted it. This isn't a technology that's coming that will be available to you in the next 2-3 years. This is available now. This is all stuff you could be doing. These are all hours and hours and hours of people's time that you could be saving already. And while there may be a cost associated with licensing, nonprofits do get discounted licensing from Microsoft. And actually, once it's done, it's done. It's a one-time cost, and then these systems will just sit in the back end forever. But let's make this real. So we've talked about the Microsoft technology. Let's actually do some dives into some real sort of like, what else can I do? Let's have a look at some real use cases, because I don't want to, this isn't just theory, and we don't want this to just sound like theory. We want to talk about the problems that you're all wrestling with every single day. And if we don't get to, or we don't mention some of the problems you have, I've tried to cover as many of them as we can. Please get in touch with me or Steve afterwards and we can go through this. To be honest, you can't get us to shut up about AI, so yeah, feel free to reach out.
So One easy win, I mean, I've mentioned it on the last slide, is donor follow-ups. So personalizing the thank yous, making sure no one slips through the cracks. And then those are the foundations where you can then scale it to thousands of people without adding any headcount. Another really good example, because I spoke about this on the last slide in a bit more detail, another example I haven't yet mentioned is knowledge base refinement. A lot of the non-profits that we speak to have really outdated knowledge base articles and really outdated internal information. And one of the newer features of Microsoft Copilot agents is the ability for Agentic AI to automatically draft updated knowledge base articles based on any new information that's been entered into the system that it's got access to. So a donor might submit an inquiry. The resolution to the inquiry might be something you've never seen before, and it's the best way you've ever encountered to resolve that inquiry. Copilot takes that information, drafts the knowledge article, and that's the new standard for resolving similar cases, and it will present it to you. Do you want to add this new article and replace the old one? Yes or no? So it's not just carrying out stuff completely on its own, but it's that kind of thing, and you apply those decision-making principles to a lot of other processes as well.
Now, I actually quite, I'm the marketer in the team, so I actually quite like donor follow-ups. But if we're talking about AI, it's here to take the boring work off us, right? So service delivery, and my apologies to anybody that does service delivery on the call, and I've just called your job boring. It's something that I don't enjoy personally, but volunteer rota, shift reminders, event scheduling, they're all super repetitive admin jobs. I find them super repetitive and hate doing them, that quietly eat up your staff time. Agentic AI can take those completely off your plate. Now, generative AI could build a volunteer schedule for you, for instance, but Agentic AI could build the volunteer schedule for you, link up to your HR system, and automatically adjust it if somebody rings in sick. That's awesome. That's taking so much money. You've got an event planned and 3 people are meant to be there. Now there's only 2, and one of those people was delivering everything. Suddenly Agentic AI kicks in and is sort of like, moving stuff around. Why would you not want that? Just taking that work off your plate, which means more and more energy can go into your actual mission, not the logistics. So you can tell I'm not much of a logistics person. And if you do think a rota is too small to apply to AI, just remember the cumulative drain of small tasks is actually what holds most people back from really getting to their mission. It's that amalgamation of day-to-day cumulative boring stuff that really slows non-profits down.
And reporting is another obvious one, and one that's also very susceptible to that cumulative build-up of admin tasks. Mm-hmm. And so generative AI, you can ask it to create a report for you with data that you've connected it to, and it will do that for you, and you can then refine it. But Agentic AI, with the parameters you set up when you originally put it in, it will automatically create reports for you, say, each week, each day, each time a new event happens. And it can actually give you that initial commentary as well. And by automating that process, I spoke to a not-for-profit a little while ago, a charity that every week 8 managers were meeting for an hour to discuss management information and put together a report. That's huge amounts of time. All really important people in the organization having to spend an hour or 2 each week. And if they have this Agentic AI reporting solution, they can either have the hour back or actually spend it on the analysis of the report and what are the findings and what do the findings mean and what do we do as a result of that, and that put their energy into that instead.
And just not to get too techie, because I said we'd do this at a high level but that can already be done now with generative AI. So we could go to your SharePoint and say, right, there's data here, 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 and here. Oh, and over here, generate a report for me, and then maybe regenerate it in 3 weeks. With Agentic AI, you can actually just set up a sort of like a prompt and say, right, here's my entire SharePoint. Give me a report on this weekly, or when X happens, generate another report. You don't have to send it off. You can just point it at everything and tell it to whoosh it down. But moving on, I'm really worried I keep calling this all boring. I don't enjoy compliance and governance. I assume other people are like me and don't enjoy compliance and governance. But imagine having a system that could quietly flag I don't know, a missing signature. So something's about to be sent to a client, somebody clicks send on an email, and actually it's pinged back to somebody else going, oh, you forgot to sign this. Great. Imagine a system that can highlight risk areas before you've even realized it's a risk, before it's even become a problem. It could pre-check grant applications against funder requirements and go, oh, you missed this. Why don't you take another look at this? It's not just time saved. That's institutional resilience. It's reputational building. It's basically risk management at machine speed.
And then when it gets a bit more interesting with that kind of donor and volunteer engagement is, AI, Agentic
Yes, we
AI.
are back to interesting again now. Why have I given you all the interesting stuff to talk about?
Because you're more interesting of a person than me, James. So you've got to have the boring topics. You make them sound fun.
Who thinks I'm making governance sound fun?
No one put your thumbs up, please. So AI scanning incoming supporter emails, automatically sorting them, triaging them to the right people. That's one step. But Agentic AI, always analysing the sentiment of your supporter communications inbound and off its own back, giving you a notification when it identifies that supporter sentiment seems to have changed lately and giving you actions to carry out to potentially increase supporter engagement as a priority for this week. And it actually works really well at doing the stuff that, just as you said, James, kind of sparked in my brain, the stuff that as a human we wouldn't consciously catch. It catches stuff early, and it's actually really helps with prevention instead of cure in many scenarios.
Yeah, and this is the kind of stuff that leaders need to be thinking about, right? It's not just about the efficiency wins. It's got to be the strategic wins. It's not about how do we save an hour on admin, which is nice, and it's a great reason to do this. But for building that culture of AI, it's very much how do I build an organization that's adaptive, responsive, and resilient? Because the small things are just happening behind my back, and actually that's fine. If you want to explore those stretch opportunities, that's really where partners come in, and I've fitted a little pitch in there to FormusPro, I think. So feel free to get in touch where we can help you with a lot of these use cases. And we really have just barely touched the surface because so many use cases for Agentic AI are going to be dependent on your particular nonprofit. We're kind of talking about the generic. Everybody's got governance, everyone's got donors, everyone's got funding, but the actual real benefit is with the nitty gritty of your own organizations. So this is where I now scare you. You've had the sales pitch. Now you get the scary bit, the FOMO. So these are the opportunities. Okay, let's ignore them. What's going to happen? What's the worst case scenario if I don't adopt AI? Well, nothing. You can just sit there in your office and continue typing on your typewriter, right? Sarcasm aside, though, this is where the gap in the future is really going to start to show. The non-profits that have adopted AI and the non-profits that haven't. In a world of compounding technologies where it just keeps growing exponentially, falling behind doesn't mean you're going to get a slightly smaller cut of the public's donations. It means you're not going to exist anymore. You just won't be able to keep up.
And the first thing to mention there is the efficiency gap,
Sure.
because obviously the efficiency gap is widening, the gap in AI adoption is widening. But if other organizations are freeing up hours and yours isn't, it's more of an exponential widening than it is a linear widening of that gap, because I think, as we all know in fundraising, the effort that you put in today may come to fruition 30 days, 60 days, 90 days down the line, and that might
18
not,
months.
Exactly. And that's all compounds and has, if another organization is saving 3 hours a day, every day they're doing that, it's just widening and widening the gap and making it so much harder for you to catch up.
And I don't think it's just about efficiency either. I mean, if we just talk about the human cost, I am assuming none of you got into the non-profit space because you wanted to become billionaires. People don't tend to choose this career because they want to get rich. They do it because the mission calls to them. Nobody in the future is going to go, I really want to work in non-profits to fill out Excel spreadsheets. And Excel's really getting a bashing from me today. I feel like there's a lot of my personality showing.
Have you been dealing with today or something?
But nobody's going to want to work with a non-profit to say, I really just want to draft emails constantly and send them out one after another. People work with non-profits because they want to make a difference to the world. And the non-profits that can advertise and say, look, we've got rid of the boring admin, the stuff you're going to do is going to really make a difference, are the one where both their staff retention but also their volunteer retention is much higher. As we know, cutting down on volunteer and staff churn, that's a big opportunity for a non-profit, right? And it's not just volunteers, Steve, no?
Well, yeah, there's the engagement side of it. Donors and supporters, even beneficiaries. Everyone just, well, this has happened, this has always happened. Everyone just always expects higher standards the more that the technology comes out to allow it. And we're at the stage now where there's still a lot of negative perception around using, AI and chatbots for communications or first line inquiries. But I think we're going to get to a point where everyone is using Agentic AI for first line inquiries and personalizing those communications. And if you're the charity that doesn't have that infrastructure in place, you are seen as, you're years behind. And if you're that far behind on the tech, then how far are you behind in terms of actually being able to do good with the money that I give you? And it's the same when we choose our service providers for our utility bills. We're going to pick the ones that make the user experience the simplest, even if we really believe in the mission, that user experience and quickness to communication and speed and everything. That is a huge factor as well, whether we like it or not.
Yeah, I mean, you touched very briefly there, but just to highlight, funders and partners, they're going to be corporate sponsors, corporate donors. They're companies like Microsoft even, they're going to be looking for innovation and impact. They don't want to back an organization that's standing still or even heading backwards. So if you're not experimenting with these tools, the risk is that funding goes to the organizations that are. And that's not a position I would imagine anybody really wants to be in. So that's why your leadership team need to treat this not as a tech issue, but as a strategic one, because you're going to be helping with your donors, you're going to be helping with your staff and your volunteer churn, you're going to be helping with your fundraising churn. It all sort of comes back to building that culture of AI early. So getting a little bit, just taking a step back, well, actually taking a step forward, but a step back first, that's Agentic AI. As I said, Agentic is the proactive rather than the reactive. And this is where I'm going to stray slightly into the realms of sci-fi. However, I feel quite qualified as a bit of a passionate AI geek to talk about this. AI as a term has actually existed for a lot longer than most of us realize. I know people from the 60s and 70s that were doing degrees in computer science and AI. It's existed really as a concept since the early 50s. We used to call it expert systems back then, and it was very much a if this, then that. For anybody with as much white hair in their as much white in their hair as I've got, you may remember the Spectrum and Commodore 64 games from back in the 80s, where it would be a text-based game rather than on a joystick. You would actually type in the commands, and it would be, please, if there's anybody as old as me, put your thumbs up. And it's not just me remembering these games, but you would type something like move forward in the thank you. It would be move forward in the forest. If you type that even slightly wrong, the AI wouldn't have a clue what you're talking about. So if you put move forward in the forest, move in the forest forward, it'd be do not understand. If you put move forward in the forest, it would. And that was painful. And then we get to the 1990s and the 2010s. And the reason it took us so long to get there was compute power. We knew what we wanted to do with AI right back in the 50s and 60s. We just didn't have the great big sort of servers that we have now, buried under the desert and the ocean, with great big cooling fans run by Microsoft and Google and AWS. They're really what's made everything possible. So in the 1990s to the 2010s, we started to have machine learning. And this is where we had fraud detection. Netflix recommendations are a great one. We've had those well before generative AI. You've watched this, so you might also like that. And I'm going to give you an individual recommendation. We then started moving into the realm of deep learning. Really, in the 2010s, we knew AI was coming. Just nobody was quite sure when it was going to hit. And a lot of tech startups have been investing a lot of money in AI for a long time. And the 2010s were really, that's when it started. We started to collect a lot of deep data, a lot of information from the internet, text, social media. We really had, for the first time, enough information to actually populate LLMs, because an LLM can only work, it's an algorithm, it works off a predictive basis, and it can only do it if it has a large enough data set. So from the 2010s of deep learning and process automation, moved to the 2020s, and I think it's November 2022, generative AI launched with OpenAI. And that's when we say AI now, really what everybody thinks of AI. It's, oh yeah, you mean ChatGPT, but up until that point, it had been completely something different, and it's going to be completely different again in the future. So for the last 3 years, we've been talking about generative AI. We are now moving into the realm of agentic. It's been around out in the wild for about 9 months or so now. And I really want you to stop and just consider, for the 50s to the 80s, expert systems, the 90s to the 2010s, machine learning, the 2010s to 2022, deep learning and process automation. We're only 3 years on from generative AI that we're already talking about agentic AI. And that really will, that proactive, that planning and the acting will change everything quite quickly. And I'm going to refer to my point earlier, you're already out of date if you're not planning agentic AI. This stuff is only going to move faster and faster. So by about 2027, 2028, I think we're going to be looking at what a lot of people are calling reflective AI. It's quite possibly it ends up with a completely different name. So don't sort of come back to me in 5 years and tell me you named this wrong. I'm happy to accept that. But a reflective AI will be an AI that can actually improve itself. So we'll give the agentic AI orders and it'll go away and do them. A reflective AI can take those orders and say, right, I did them. Probably could have done it better like this. And it will take the results and the next time do it better without your input. So agentic AI at the moment will go, these are the results. You'll be able to check the results. Reflective AI will do that for you. You then probably 5-10 years from now, so 2028, 2030, 2032, you're going to be talking about collaborative AI. And that's where these agentic AI and reflective AI systems can start talking to each other, both within your own organization. So sales and marketing can finally work together, or sales and finance, so they can get their expenses sorted and all those boring arguments stop. But also within other organizations, to put that in terms of manufacturing, for instance, one manufacturer could talk to a different supplier, and the two AIs, the two agentic AIs, could actually haggle over the cost of, I don't know, potatoes on a supply line. And actually, that will all happen behind the scenes, which is really scary, but really fascinating. Moving a little bit further out now, I don't think it's going to be long, 5-10 years, before we start seeing embodied AI. And I'm not talking sort of robots walking the street, but the example I always give is, well, actually, if you can talk to generative AI with voice recognition, what do you need a receptionist for? Why couldn't you just have a screen, go in, press the check-in button, or a motion sensor will recognize you as you come in and go, oh, hi, Mr. Crossland, are you here to see da-da-da-da-da? Yep, go right through. We're going to start to see more of that on self-service checkouts, in receptions, self-drive cars, taxis. We're a little bit further out from an AGI. That's the realm of Skynet and truly sentient AI. I'm not going to bore you with that because you're here to learn about agentic AI, but there are people that think it's going to happen in the next 10-15 years. There are other people that say it's another 150 years out. Only time will tell. I personally think a person has already been born that will be able to talk to an AI as another life form. But as I say, we are straying into the realms of science fiction. So it is fascinating though, and the point I'm trying to make is these things are going to come in waves that are closer and closer and closer together, and keeping up with them and getting started is going to become harder and harder and harder if you are not experimenting now. Now is the time to do it. If you are still thinking about generative AI, please start. If it's with us, absolutely fantastic. If it's with somebody else, great. But start now, because this thing isn't slowing down. It's just getting faster and faster and faster. And it's also going to make tectonic shifts, both within your organization and within society. It's not just going to change how businesses and organizations work. It's going to reshape society itself. There are going to come a point where we are going to have to, as leaders, start looking at upskilling our staff, because so many roles can now be done by agentic AI. And it's all well and good saying, well, I can replace this job, this job, this job, this job. What do those people do? That's the point where governments are going to start looking at UBI and UBS, so universal basic income or universal basic schemes. They may start looking at AI taxes for organizations that use AI because, well, they're having to pay extra welfare because so many people have been made redundant by AI. Taxi drivers are going to be a great example. In the next 20 years, I don't think you're going to be able to get a job as a taxi driver, because why wouldn't Uber just invest in a fleet of self-driving cars? Amazon deliveries are already been done, experimented on with drones. So Amazon delivery drivers and DPD drivers, they're probably going to go. Same with Uber Eats. Why would your pizza not be delivered? And these are all sort of like quite low collar blue jobs that can quite easily be replaced. What do those people do next? And it's not just blue collar jobs either. It's going to be the white collar ones. And I think this is, as leaders of non-profits, certainly, you have a responsibility to your reputation to look after people. So there is your finance clerks, your customer service agents, your junior lawyers. They're all going to need upskilling and retraining to do other kinds of stuff, because AI agents will be able to handle so much faster and cheaper. How can you benefit from that pool of work towards your mission?
And it's not just science fiction, is it? As much as you would think AI powered drones delivering your pizza would be. It's like, if you've been to a McDonald's in the States recently, you'll have seen the move towards full automation, wouldn't you? And you call a large service provider, and 9 times out of 10 you're already on the phone with an AI agent. And so, like it or not, this stuff's real, and it's a mind shift to adaptation. I think now is, obviously there's a lot of other implications, aren't there? But it is not going anywhere.
No, if fewer traditional jobs exist, then governments aren't going to be able to rely on the tax bases that they previously have. Welfare will increase. Actually, that's going to increase the demand on non-profits. So that's the kind of thing that needs to be sort of planned for now. But it's also where responsible leaders need to look at reskilling and upskilling their teams in AI so that they are ready for agentic AI. It's no good in 5-6 years' time with a bunch of people sat around going, oh, great, my job's been replaced by, I can't remember what it was called. It was an Agentic AI. They need to be able to know what it is so they can use it. And I don't want to scare anyone. That's not the point of this. My point is to start building cultures and start thinking so that you can plan for this, because it is coming. So what should you be doing about this? Certainly over the, not in abstract terms, but actually in terms of a timeline. It's all well and good me going, oh, this could happen in 2035. This is what 2070 is going to look like. How do you actually break this down into practical steps? What should you be doing in the next 12 months, for instance, Steve? What would you do?
The next 12 months, the first 12 months, that is your getting comfortable with starting this stuff, starting to experiment and realize what good looks like and what bad looks like. So it's a good idea to start small with some pilot projects. Pick 1 or 2 use cases, like some of the ones we've mentioned around maybe donor follow-ups, volunteer scheduling, board reporting, and you can run these things as safe experiments. So with Microsoft Copilot, we or someone else could help you set up an environment where you've got Copilot cornered into only using a subset of your data, or only carrying out specific processes without oversight. You're not going to get these things perfect, and that's not the point. It's more about momentum. You need to get both the technology, an understanding of the technology, as well as get your teams comfortable with using AI, so it slowly starts becoming a part of the culture and not just a side thing that they use in their personal lives. And it helps for work too. So just start. Doesn't matter what it looks like. Doesn't matter how big, how small. Just do something.
I've probably looked at this slide about 50 times now, and I haven't realised how scary that finger actually looks. I don't know if that's because of what I was just talking about. But yeah, Steve, you're absolutely right. But then you need to expand that out. So you've started safe, you've started small, you've started building momentum. Then over the next 2 years, start to have some fun and get creative with it. Start building multi-agent systems where the marketing agent can talk to the finance agent, can talk to the sales agent. Put it in non-profit terms. Imagine a donor engagement agent, a finance agent, and a volunteer scheduling agent all working together. That's when your efficiency, but also your innovation becomes scalable. And that's the trick with all organizations, right? Scalability. And again, it's when you need to start having the conversations that not about redundancies, but about repurposing and upskilling. At the point where you're at a multi-agent system in the next few years, that's the point where you need to be asking the question, great, what can my staff be doing to move my mission forward now that doesn't include this?
And those sorts of things and where to start is exactly what Microsoft partners like us and others are here for. And we can help you with the tech, but it's not just about dropping in the tech and hoping it works. You've got to focus on designing those systems safely, putting the right guardrails in place, and just always making sure that human element is front and center. And what that looks like for some charities, I'm finding, is that especially with kind of the Microsoft stack, there's so much in the Microsoft technology product suite. And some of it, for example, the Copilot sales agent, you wouldn't necessarily automatically assume as a non-profit organization that can be repurposed as a donor relations or fundraising management agent. But because we've worked with a lot of non-profits and other suppliers, other Microsoft partners that have also worked with a lot of non-profits will be the same, we know that you can repurpose it that way, or we'll know other tools and technologies in the stack that at first glance may not seem relevant, but actually could really be useful when used in the context of your organization. So is two parts that the likes of us and kind of technology suppliers can help you with, and it's about setting up the right parameters and safety measures, but also just actually giving you an idea of what the art of the possible is with AI and agentic AI.
And then sort of over the next 5 years, 10 years, I think you're really going to start to see actual agents as part of your org charts. And at that point, you need to start having conversations about accountability. Who's in charge of the AI? How much sort of like freedom can you give this AI, and how much control do you want to retain over it? And those are going to be very personal conversations to your organization itself, because different people are going to be comfortable with different levels. So the stuff that you really want to think about from today, because I need to start wrapping things up, but the questions I want to leave you with is first responsibility. So when your AI system makes a decision, who's accountable for it? If it gets it wrong, does that fall on the system, the vendor, or yourself? Those are all governance conversations that need to start happening. Second one, as we've already said, is starting small and building momentum. Steve, what would you do next?
Well, I think one of the big things is how much autonomy do you give it? How much decision making are you actually comfortable handing over? Because obviously, if you give AI too much freedom, you create risks. But if you too little, then you stifle the benefits. So there is a bit of an art to finding the right middle ground where you can scale it with trust and with humans still steering. And you're only going to gauge that the more you do it.
Yep. And the one that we've not touched on yet, but will actually be a part of what you need to start thinking about, is trust with your donors and the public. So when execution becomes instantaneous, and by that I mean if somebody jumps on your website or your chatbot or your phone and it's instantly answered, there is going to be a pushback against AI. That time will come and that time will pass. And you'll find, just as in the 90s, where a lot of jobs, call center jobs, were shipped out into India, and then you had certain banks advertising going, we only hire people in our own country. You will have that with AI, where some organizations will be like, this saves us a fortune. Others will say, come work with us. We don't use AI at all. You need to figure out how to benefit from AI whilst maintaining trust. And I think transparency is going to be a big part of that. You can't just point at something and go, the system did it. Leadership is going to be, how do you put in that explainability, not just for efficiency's sake, but for trust's sake?
And that's the shift that's needed in leadership. People are in leadership are obviously in very influential positions, and especially in the non-profit sector, where actually non-profit leaders are probably more representative of the thoughts and feelings and values of the staff and the volunteers. So it's a big job for leaders at the moment to help people understand that it's partnering with AI. It's not just using it, and like modeling the right behaviors and making sure that people actually feel supported through the change.
Yeah, and who's, again, a little sales pitch, but there's a lot we've talked about today. So who's going to help you navigate this? Because the truth is, you don't know what you don't know. Same for myself and Steve. No one person can know everything. So the right advisors are the ones who don't promise you magic bullets. They're the ones who can ask you and frame better questions for you within your organization. And that's the role that I envision for FormusPro over the coming years. And that's how I would want to help people. It's really moving them through that non-profit sort of journey and those use cases. But that is exactly on the hour. So if this is the, if anybody's got any questions or answers, put them in the chat now. My name's James. Feel free to connect with me there on LinkedIn, connect with Steve, or just follow FormusPro, because we talk about this a lot on our LinkedIn. But you've got us for you've got us for as long as you want. As I said, you can't get us to shut up about AI once we start talking about it. But there is a great question in the chat from Benita already. Can you speak to the environmental impacts that AI data centers are creating in rural areas? That's the ethics of AI and the sustainability of AI are a question for an entirely different webinar, to be honest with you. My gut would say, look, the genie's out of the bottle already. Whether it's good for the environment, whether it's bad for the environment, AI isn't going away, and it's going to be getting used no matter what. There weren't companies 100 years ago saying, I'm not going to use the car. I don't think that lead is any good for the environment. The good side, though, is the more that we use AI, the more it optimizes itself to reduce that cost. And the organizations that run it, like Microsoft, Google, Amazon, are all moving themselves towards both carbon neutral and carbon positive. So there is a lot of benefits there, but yeah, ultimately that is going to, the amount you implement in it will come down to your own ethicity of your non-profit. Oh, true. We just need to make awareness of the importance of ethics and responsible use of AI everywhere. Victoria, I completely agree with you. It is a wide-ranging subject. As I said, I touched on UBI and UBS and sort of redundancies, and it's actually a massively complicated subject. If we're talking about call centers, for instance, there's a lot of call centers in the Far East. Actually, at the point where we can replace all call centers, there's issues globally there. So it's not just environmental, it's societal. But we could talk about this all day long. Ultimately, it needs to just work for your non-profit. But yeah, feel free to get in touch to be honest, if you want chat about this all day. Was there any other questions? I think we did a good job, Steve. I think everyone's running out of chest. I'm going to just wait a minute or so just in case anyone's typing. This chat tends to stay live, so if you want to drop chat messages in afterwards, feel free, or reach out to me and Steve directly. If not, thank you. It's the end of the day for me and Steve, but hope you enjoy your afternoon, and hopefully to speak to you and work with you again in the future at some point.
Thanks for joining, everyone.
Yeah, thank you all.